For more on the speech by Hillary Clinton and what happened tonight at the DNC in Philadelphia, we go live back to Philadelphia to be joined by Don DeBar, radio host and political commentator. Mr. DeBar, thank you so much for joining us. So the big night was there. Hillary Clinton officially accepted her nomination as the Democratic presidential candidate for the U.S. Some major points that she made, and I'd like to focus on both regarding domestic policies and foreign policies. But I'd like to maybe begin by the foreign policy first. She referred, as did Barack Obama last night, to Iran's nuclear program, exactly in her words, that said, "I am proud to have put a lid on Iran's nuclear program without firing a single shot." What's your opinion about that?
Well, first of all, there was no nuclear weapons program in Iran. Just about everyone in the world agrees that that's the case, with the exception of American politicians. Secondly, actually, the negotiations, the hard negotiations that finally resulted in an agreement, took place not while she was in the government at all, but rather with Secretary John Kerry, as you may well remember.
And another point that she mentioned right after talking about Iran's nuclear program was keep supporting Israel's security.
Yeah, that's a common, almost like a Tourette's, phrasing in American politics. Politicians have to cite, for some reason, that Israel is America's best friend. Americans are supposed to be ahistorical about exactly what happened to Palestine in the period since World War II and what is happening to the Palestinians on an almost daily basis. So this is another example of that. You see that with Trump as well. Just about everyone that runs for office here pays lip service to that. Clinton herself has had some folks here from, claiming they're supporting Palestinian rights, dressed in Palestinian attire. I haven't seen Clinton speak out once yet. Since Barack Obama was elected president, there have been 3 bombing campaigns against Gaza, for example. I haven't seen her do anything about it. I don't expect she'll do anything about it as president, except perhaps sell more bombs to Netanyahu.
So, as you said, no matter who comes to power, the U.S. will remain a friend of Israel. And moving on to another foreign policy point that she talked about was standing with the U.S. NATO allies in the face of threats, particularly likely threat coming from the side of Russia.
Yeah, she's trying to. There's a very interesting development underway in the United States. The Republican Party, since Trump's nomination, has backed away, at least rhetorically, from both the neocon project of massive intervention in other countries, particularly Muslim countries, but around the world, and instead is taking these claims to take a hands-off view, and also in relation to Russia and China, particularly Trump has said that he prefers negotiating and doing trade and doing business with them to warmongering. And as some evidence of that, he's also challenged the actual existence, the value, the utility of NATO, saying that it was constructed for the purpose of addressing the threat from the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union hasn't existed for 25 years. NATO's outlived its purpose. He's also said that if there's going to be a military alliance between the United States and anyone, but referring in the beginning to NATO, that those involved should pay their fair share. Now, the political reality is that NATO countries are supposed to pay 2% of their GDP towards their own defense. They don't do that because of the political conditions within their own countries. People don't want to pay 2% of their GDP to be in NATO. And if they were paying their fair share, as Trump puts it, it would be more in the vicinity of 5% of the GDP, given the enormous amount of weaponry and the fairly large a number of people that are under military service for this. So what he's really saying is that NATO, as it currently exists under a Trump administration, would be dismantled in one fashion or another, and the entire geostrategic relationship between Russia and the United States and Russia and Europe would change drastically. It would be demilitarized, and it would take place, any competition would take place in the boardroom instead of on the battlefield. I think it's very significant.
Yeah, Mr. DeBar, what do you think of what she had to say about unfair trade deals of the U.S. with other countries? And she particularly mentioned China, and also lambasted Trump for his businesses that are branched in other countries, like she mentioned Turkey, Mexico, China, and some other countries, and saying that those businesses should be brought back to the U.S., and saying that she would fight unfair trade deals.
She'll say anything. She now understands, having almost lost the nomination, really, unless she stole it. She would have lost the nomination to Bernie Sanders on those issues. And watching Trump essentially seize the Republican Party from all of the party leaders, party structure, the Bushes, all the people that have been the Republican Party for a couple of decades or more, lost control of it to Trump in months over these issues. Suddenly she wakes up and says, hey, I better talk like that too, and that's what she's doing. But the part that's relevant to remember is that she negotiated, or her husband negotiated, or she helped to sell, depending on which role she was playing, as Secretary of State or as, she helped negotiate TPP, helped draft that. Whether it was when she was First Lady, she helped sell NAFTA on Capitol Hill, or when she was in the Senate. The whole thing that happened with China from her husband's administration through her time in the Senate, the relationship changed, and the balance of payments, balance of trade, all those things changed drastically to the conditions that Sanders was criticizing. You know, she's responsible, as responsible as any human being, for exactly those things that she now claims she's going to rescue us from. So I don't give any credibility to that. The other thing, though, that I was getting to was that not only has Trump's side, the Republican Party, now taking a non-interventionist foreign policy and one that wants to back away from confrontation with Russia and China, but you see the Democrats over the past week have started to sound like cold warriors in earnest. The malfeasance that was uncovered by the WikiLeaks releases of emails, for example, isn't to be, the contents of those emails isn't to be addressed, the malfeasance isn't to be addressed, but rather by what mechanism those emails get to the to WikiLeaks or whoever the agents were that distributed those. Was it Russia? And then Trump saying jokingly, gee, if Russia has more of those, I hope they release them soon, pointing fingers at him as if he were a traitor to the communist conspiracy in 1951. It's a very interesting twist, and it's a pretty scary one, because it's also sort of the proto of a propaganda campaign that would take place for a war. Now, the objective conditions are that you have the U.S. military deployed from the Baltics to the Korean Peninsula. They've been running war games, like full-dress war games, since the beginning of this year, really the end of last year, so 8 months or so. To Russia and China, these war games look like an attack. And as they keep coming in, they have to be considering at the high levels of the military, are they coming in this time? And they have to arrange their defenses, go through all of this. Well, while that's going on, they're starting to hype up anti-Russian sentiment, to almost a feverish pitch, the way they were doing it with Trump the past few days. That has to be a very discouraging thing to watch from Moscow or Beijing, or really from anywhere else in the world, because if they provoke a war, if they stumble into a war, or if they affirmatively dive into a war with Russia and China, most of humanity is going to pay a very high price.
And Mr. DeBar, let's close in the discussion maybe with some domestic issues, some intra-party rifts that we had witnessed earlier between Clinton and Sanders. We know that supporters of Bernie Sanders are still pretty much upset about the fact that he had to drop out of the race. They're still outside the convention center in Philadelphia, raising protests, clashing with police. There have been arrests. And we saw that Clinton sort of tried to soothe the supporters of Bernie Sanders by thanking Sanders, by trying to focus on their commonalities and sort of urging him to be united with her, to work on their commonalities, saying that his cause was her cause. What do you think of that effort to sort of bridge the rifts between these two former rivals?
Well, the one-word answer I can't use on television. It's in bad taste and it's a vulgarity in terms of what I think of it. While I was connecting with you guys, there was a protest. A group of people, maybe 150, walked out of Clinton's speech, and they were marching out right behind where I am here, outside protesting. They were Sanders supporters. The Clinton speech tonight may have made some rhetorical gestures towards them, but the behavior of the DNC and of Clinton and of her own supporters towards the Sanders people over the course of this week is quite in the opposite direction. For example, the very issues that she was trumpeting tonight, that Wall Street should never be allowed to destroy Main Street again. She was using the rhetorical position that Sanders was making against Wall Street for American workers. The speakers that she had this week did not include people from the Sanders camp, but it did include, for example, Michael Bloomberg, who has to be the biggest insult to the Sanders people that you could imagine. He not only represents Wall Street, but he's the most public image of Wall Street that exists in the United States. And he was about as close to her and her husband and President Obama in terms of the position of authority that they were granted at this event on the stage as anyone. I mean, and that there were many incidents like that where it was clear to these people that they weren't wanted. It was clear that they weren't going to really get anything material out of all of the work that they did. And it was clear also that they were held in contempt. And that's something that is revealed by the emails, in some considerable depth. The people at the DNC, the people in the Clinton campaign, even their friends and allies in the American media held the people in the Sanders campaign in contempt. And they know it. And with all of the work that they did, creating new space, new political space for independent political action, it was very distressing to them and it angered them. And a lot of these people are now going back. For example, I met this one young man who was a delegate from one of the suburbs northwest of Chicago. He got 27,000 votes to come here as a delegate. It's a Republican district. He, as a Sanders Democratic delegate, got more votes than all of the Republican candidates in that district. And he said, I met probably half of those 27,000 people, shook their hands, spoke with them about the issues, and the primary things that they wanted to see, A, they didn't want Hillary Clinton because she represented the establishment to them and they were finished with the establishment. And B, they wanted to make sure that the issues with respect to their own lives, the jobs being brought back, these trade deals not going through and exacerbating an already ugly situation, those things happen. He said, I can't come here all of a sudden and say, I'm now supporting Hillary Clinton because I represent those 27,000 people. And even if I did, having spoken with half of them, I know that no matter what I tell them to do, they're not going to vote for Hillary Clinton.
Mr. DeBar, I'm sorry I have to jump in right now because that's all the time we have for the moment. Thank you so much for being with us. That was Don DeBar, radio host and political commentator, talking to us live out of Philadelphia. It was the fourth and the last night of the Democratic National Convention held in Philadelphia. And what you just saw and heard earlier was Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton officially accepting her nomination and making her acceptance speech, the